the conference and our last meaningful act, I think. I'd like to say thank you for coming, and I'd also like to thank the panellists for agreeing to be part of this. This is slightly nerve-wracking in the sense that we asked the panel members to give their thoughts on the conference themes in relation to the future. Now, their comments, their things that they will raise, have come out of the sessions that they've been to, so it will be very conversational, shall we say. So, why have we put 5 very nice practitioners centre stage here? For the simple reason that the conference theme is the practitioner, and we wanted to have not a practitioner, someone that would give a particular view, but to have a broad range, or as much as we could, of the practitioner in various configurations in terms of context, profile, experience of EAP. So the format is very simple. We're going to ask each of the panel members, Jennifer, Millie, Bin, David and Jenny, to speak for about 6 minutes each on a particular theme or idea or themes that have emerged for them. So that will take us to about 30 minutes, and then the floor is open to succinct comments and questions, either for the panel or for individual members of the panel. And I think that's about it. So we'll start with Jennifer.
So hi and welcome everyone. First I'll give a brief introduction of who I am. So I am both a practitioner. I'm the head teacher of ESL programs at Dalhousie University, which is in Nova Scotia in eastern Canada. And I'm also finishing up my doctoral thesis on language policy and practice in Canadian higher education. So I kind of bring this a bit of a comparative lens when I've been participating in the conference this weekend. A comparative lens on EAP and how it's practiced in different contexts around the world. And so I'm going to, in my 5 or 6 minutes, I'd like to share 3 kind of interrelated themes that I've observed this weekend. So the first would be about EAP's contribution to higher education in general. So, we as EAP practitioners, we have so much to share in very diverse areas. Internationalization of the curriculum, internationalization at home, in pedagogical development, in teaching and learning. In a lot of institutions, some of the best teaching on campus is happening in EAP units. We have a lot to share about admissions, retention, student services, and as well as about the beast that is academic integrity. But getting recognition and gaining legitimacy in these areas at our institutions has been a challenge that I've heard many of you share in your sessions this weekend. Another sphere of influence that we have as EAP practitioners in higher education is around influencing ideologies, attitudes, and beliefs around language, and also around a host of related themes such as international students and things like this. And so on that note, in terms of kind of underlying ideologies, in a lot of Anglophone higher education, there's this underlying monolingual mindset which positions the standard or the default student as a monolingual English-speaking student, a local student of the standard English variety. And this underpins a lot of a lot of what happens in higher education in terms of structure, programs, curriculum, and as well as the objectives and pedagogies in some EAP contexts as well. And so I've had the pleasure of being in some sessions this weekend that have talked about how to break down or to challenge this monolingual mindset or ideology, and to break down binaries around native speaker, non-native speaker, home or international students. So I've seen some great presentations on the very complex multilingual context of South Africa, for example, of Toronto, the transnational context in China, and also the interplay between internationalization and widening participation here in the UK. And so this has really led me to, in thinking about the future of EAP, I see the future as multilingual or plurilingual and breaking down this monolingual mindset. I guess finally, the last point I'd like to make, and some of my colleagues will talk about this in more detail, is a bit about roles and identities of EAP practitioners in higher education. As you know, there's lots of scholarship around the fact that EAP is operating on the margins in academia in terms of status, job titles, administrative location, and to offer a comparative perspective from Canada. Canada's no exception. In Canada, you could have an EAP unit as an academic department. It could be in the libraries, student services, marketing and recruitment, so there's this common marginalization of things, and but it extends not just to EAP practitioners, but to our students, and our students are often, and our students and language work. So this is marginalized. It's left in many cases to be an extracurricular undertaking. Language and academic literacy is something that in many cases is seen to be, or is thought to happen kind of by osmosis or by accident. And so to go back to the underlying attitudes and ideologies that operate in our institutions and society, in our work, and a lot of the work I've heard you share this weekend, people have shared how through their work, their collaboration across the institution in research, on committees, on projects, they're really essentially raising critical language awareness across the institution and in society in general. And so what this is doing is raising not only our profile as practitioners, but ultimately the profile of our students. And so that's what is really important. So, thank you.
Hello, my name is Millie, and I work here at the University of Leeds. And I consider myself an academic with linguistics background who got into teaching, because teaching is a family curse in my case. I would like to follow on with the different roles as we as EAP practitioners play and the identity that comes with it. So at the first plenary session, we heard about the different roles that EAP teachers play. And at the heart of it is helping our students in class, if you want to be a sage on the stage or a guide on the side, or both. In tutorials, when marking, giving feedback to students. We also incorporate technology, innovate, explore genres, and academic communities. We develop courses, sometimes content-based, so we need to work with subject specialists as well. And perhaps we need to lead a team of teachers. Now, the questions that have been raised is, what other roles do we need to play? Should we become in-house formative proofreaders for our students? Should we be gatekeepers who will protest when we see students with low level? Should we protest? These students should not be at our university. Should we act as developers as well? Developing teachers who come from ELT and want to get into EAP? Should we use our expertise to help develop subject teachers, because they themselves might be academics who got into teaching? And that raises another question: are we academics? And I think part of it is where you come from. Did you get into EAP from an ELT background, so were you a teacher first, or were you an academic who became a teacher? But then what determines if we are academics? Is it determined by the institution at which we work? Is it determined by our contract? By the skills that we have? And do we have the academic skills that we need to help our students? Is it how we self-identify ourselves, or is it how the field defines us? This is my first EAP-only conference, and I've heard a lot of discussion of whether we are academics or not, and who we are. I've been to many linguistic conferences before, and I can assure you, morphologists don't question who they are. Last night I checked with my husband, who's in organic chemistry and biochemistry. Scientists don't question who they are. So I think this is specific to EAP, this obsession of who we are. And one idea that most resonates with me from this conference is that there's a lot of othering, us, EAP teachers, versus them, academics, and this is not helpful. Instead, we should be trying to build relationships with the subject teachers in many different ways. We can team teach together, we can ask them to help us develop our courses, and perhaps we could collaborate on research and scholarship activities as well, so that we give them the expertise in teaching, and then they give us the expertise in research skills. And the idea of should we do research and scholarship has also been discussed here a lot. And a suggestion has been made that we should do scholarship in our own time. And I feel this has been quite controversial. So to summarize some arguments why we should do scholarship in our own time is, I would say, this is what happens in other fields, as I can attest as a wife of a scientist. University jobs are not 9-to-5 jobs. There's another argument that it has always been done that way, and that if you choose something that you're passionate about, your scholarship is more of a hobby than a job. After all, it's Sunday. You're here. You're doing scholarship in your own time at this very moment. And I know many teachers enjoy marking essays at the weekends. So why I prefer myself to do scholarship at the weekend rather than marking essays. Now, there are also some arguments of why we should not be doing scholarship in our own time. You could argue it's exploitation of very bright people. It certainly doesn't suit everybody, because apparently some people want to have a life. But my question is, can we afford not to do scholarship? So I've been thinking of what other ways are there. If you want to do scholarship but feel you don't have time to do that, what other ways are there for you? So my first suggestion would be, let's revisit our time management skills. Maybe by marking everything in the essay doesn't help the student, doesn't help you. Another idea is, start small. You don't have to work on a big project. Your first paper will not likely be published in a high-impact journal. But start small, it's okay. It's not an either-or business. Another idea would be collaborate with others. It will empower you, you will learn from others, it will save you time. And another idea is go to your institution and tell them that at this conference you learned, at other institutions people do scholarship, they have time to do it. I hope that at our next BALEAP conference, we will all hear success stories of how scholarship has been introduced in institutions. And these can come from individuals, so individual stories of how and why an EAP practitioner started scholarship, from institutions and center directors of how they introduce scholarship at their workplace. And ideally, these will also explore the impact that this has had on the teachers and on the students. Because if we have research which suggests that EAP scholarship transforms EAP practice, then we can argue we need scholarship elsewhere. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Bing Zhou from the Language Center, Xi'an Jiaotong, Liverpool University in China. And I'm an EP practitioner as well. And our university is a joint venture between University of Liverpool here and Xi'an Jiaotong University in China. So we are an EMI context, so everything is taught in English. And we have a 2-year EEP program. So we're teaching more than 5,000 students in year 1, year 2. And we have about 180 EEP teachers, probably the largest language center in Asia. We also have some other modern languages teachers. And also, 30% of the EEP teachers are from Britain. I just got this figure from my colleague yesterday. Actually, my focus or my interest is technology, right? Since I'm keen to use technology in my EEP teaching myself as well. So in this conference, I attended some sessions in technology area, and I'm very excited to see that many teachers are also keen to use technologies. And there are a lot of sessions actually are talking about the technology too. I think this is brilliant, fascinating. And I'm also happy to see technology is listed as one of the top areas by the BALEAP panel on Friday. And also technology actually is a top 2. So I'm happy to see that. Right. So in this conference, so what types of technology have been discussed by many EEP practitioners? So I found that, okay, so something like MOOC, right? I believe many of you are familiar with MOOC, and some talks focused on MOOCs. So based on, for example, future learning, right? And I think also fantastic. They have a large number of learners on their MOOC courses, right? And also in China, we also develop many MOOC courses. Right? There are also a large number of learners. It benefits learners not only in China or UK, it benefits learners from all over the world, right? And particularly, my impression for EEP courses in MOOC delivered by university in the UK, including Coventry University, Southampton, Reading University, probably Leeds. Have you developed MOOC courses? I attended several sessions, so I think the EEP courses in the MOOC area actually are brilliant. And another teacher talked about Moodle. Yes, also she established some online teaching material on Moodle, also is fantastic. And the one teacher used OneDrive, Pass, and several teachers talked about Padlet, right? It's brilliant, Padlet, so for students to share their experiences and post their messages on Padlet, and it's also brilliant too. Also, WhatsApp and social media, virtual learning, and a few teachers talked about using Kahoot, also very good too. And games for vocabulary and mobile learning. Yeah, I attended a mobile learning workshop today. It's fantastic, and the teacher introduced several fantastic tools, including Padlet. And amazing that for me is that the teacher used WeChat. Well, WeChat is the Chinese WhatsApp. And the amazing reason for the teachers to use WeChat is that 70% of her students are Chinese. And the Chinese students are good at using WeChat, so she thinks that, okay, using WeChat, okay? And we also tried WeChat in the workshop. It's brilliant, okay? Some other useful tools are the Webback, Corpus, etc. Right? And so I think the technology can provide the learners with more opportunities to improve the learning and also improve the communication for peer feedback. And also this is very important for peer feedback. And also it can enrich our EP teachers' classroom teaching, class materials, and communication with your students, right? And also it meets students' needs in using technology. And it is that the current students are mobile generation. So it's something like for me, we have to use technology to meet students' needs and their preferences, right? And but one missing topic here is AI, artificial intelligence technology. AI has been extensively discussed recently. For example, last year in a COP conference in Belgium, one of the keynote speakers talked about AI. And also there were several sessions talking about AI as well. But I believe in the future, maybe next BALEAP conference, some sessions will talk about AI, including myself. So I'm also keen to explore using AI too. So maybe next BALEAP I will talk about AI. Right, thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is David Camorani from UCL in London. I'm going to talk about similar points that Millie raised earlier, but I'm going to frame them more from an identity perspective, which is what I'm interested in. I was born in Switzerland to Italian parents. I moved to the UK as an EFL student 19 years ago. I was an EFL teacher, I was a professional dancer, then I became an EAP teacher, so no wonder I've got identity issues. But I would like to make 3 points. One is perhaps a bit more of a, shall we say, doom and gloom one. The second one is a more positive one, and then with the third point, I'd like to look to the future. So one of the things that I noticed, I went to most of the sessions that dealt that either directly or indirectly dealt with identity in the scholarship and research strand in the last 3 days. And one of the things that I noticed was that identity is, whether we are aware of it or not, it's pervasive, it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. I noticed it when I was having lunch, people talking to one another, the way they talk about EAP, and also more explicitly in talks. So we know about, the more negative influences on our professional identities, things like, the commodification of EAP, the massification, the ambivalent status of EAP practitioners and EAP itself. We know how that, we're starting to understand how that affects us now at the micro level in our practice as well. Lots of talk about marginalization, trivialization, impoverished status perceptions. Are we academic or are we academics? Are we part of a university or are we part of a support service unit? Do we teach language? Do we teach content? As Nigel Harwood put it when we mark essays, am I a cleaner or am I a teacher? So what transpires here is that these identity questions, they deal with elements of doubt, disquiet, angst sometimes. So identity is not something that we think about when we go for a walk in the park, when we go to the shop. It's something that we become much more aware of when we are made to feel out of place or when we feel out of place. And my interest lies in when do we feel out of place or when are we made to feel out of place professionally. Maybe a mini personal anecdote of mine was my first pre-sessional. It was at UCL, and then I went to and worked at a different university, and then I returned to UCL. But after I finished my first pre-sessional, it was an 8-week pre-sessional. I had no experience whatsoever. I had very, very, very little support. This was before the time of my current pre-sessional line manager who's sitting over there. So I can say that I had almost no support. No, actually I had no support whatsoever. And I worked, I think it was about 14 to 15 hours every day, 7 days a week for 8 weeks. And I started feeling a sense of belonging to this institution and a sense of collegiality. And I thought, this is great. I'm a bit of a workaholic, but yeah, I thought, this is great. This is where I belong. This is who I am now as a professional. And then there was a permanent position available at UCL, which I didn't get. I went to the interview. I didn't get it the first time round. And I remember sitting in this park thinking, who am I going to be next? I've got a mortgage to pay and a cat to feed. And I had very, very troubling identity questions there. I really felt like Zygmunt Bauman, who used to be a sociology professor here at Leeds, he used to call it a vagrant human, no longer necessary for the completion of the economic cycle of the precessional industry. So I had no reference point for the self, for the professional self. But it's not all in doom and gloom. I mean, this is one of the things that I noticed. That the second more positive aspect of the conference that I noticed was that we have a huge amount of agency, that we can engage in scholarship. And I'm not going to go through all the details because Millie already has. We can seek qualifications or identity on paper. We can seek professional association, whether it's the BALEAP fellowship or the HEA fellowship. It gives you a sense of belonging. It gives you can I don't know. You can join a union. That adds a political dimension to your professional identity. You can restructure your environment by seeking professional development opportunities like these. And the point that I made in my talk, we can stop self-marginalizing all the time. Stop saying things like, oh, I'm a lowly EAP practitioner. I'm not a specialist. Or I don't really know what I'm talking about. I just teach language. Because that's quite a pervasive thing. As far as the future is concerned, and where I saw a lot of professional friction, I'd like to see a little bit more focus on interdisciplinary differences, because we have a lot of fantastic research in terms of genre differences. So when we're asked, for example, or I've recently been asked to create a 2-week course for electronic and electrical engineers. And when I was asked to do that, I went to the library, I took out some books and I put them on the shelf in my bedroom, and I left them there to catch dust because I thought, this is not me. I can't do that. No one is here to support me. I don't know anything about the epistemologies of electronic and electrical engineering. But actually, once you start, you realize you can do it. We're perfectly capable. We're perfectly able. But do we always get the support that we need? I am not quite sure. So I'd like to see a little bit more focus in the future, hopefully, on these interdisciplinary variations that we have, and maybe a synthesis of these differences as well, so that it becomes a little bit more, easier to oversee it all and to understand it all as well, because it's a bit fragmented at the moment. So, these are my thoughts. Thank you very much.
So, because I'm last, I'm going to point perhaps a little bit more to the future than some of the others have done. I've been to lots of interesting talks this time, and of course I've been to lots on corpora and how corpora can inform our teaching and learning and so on, but I'm not going to talk about those. I'm going to surprise some of you. I'm not going to talk about those things at all. There are 4 key words that I've written down that I'm going to talk about: skills, language, ideas, collaboration. So first of all, skills. Now, the first thing I did when I knew I was going to be on the panel was something similar to Maggie Charles. I built a corpus. I built a corpus of the abstracts for this conference, and some of you had a look at it in the workshop yesterday. And like Maggie, I noticed the dominance of writing. I searched for the word writing in the corpus of abstracts, and it was there over 300 times. Reading, 56. Speaking, 41. Listening, 18. Now, I think this is partly because on pre-sessional we tend to be concerned with outputs. And therefore we tend to focus quite a lot on writing, and it's something tangible, so it's something easier to investigate. But actually it's really important to remember that on students' academic courses, they will learn their disciplinary knowledge largely through reading and listening. And we need to help them with that. And next time, I would personally like to see more on reading and listening. So that's one thought. Language. Andy Gillett in the panel on Friday said, if BALEAP doesn't concentrate on language, nobody will. Now, we've had some talks, certainly at this conference, ways to express evaluation, vocabulary, pronoun use. They're just a few of the ones that I went to. But the theme, it's great to have a conference theme, but it's taken us a little bit away from language this time, and we shouldn't let it draw us permanently away from language. Teachers have gaps in their linguistic knowledge, and it's important to share knowledge of language at conferences so that we can learn from each other. That links, in a sense, to my next point about ideas, practical ideas, take-home ideas. Olwyn also talked about the importance of linking theory and practice, and it's really important to link the two. Now, I've talked about skills and language, but I would like to see more people talking about their classroom practice in their context. And this links to something a BALEAP newbie said to me, who said, you know, the standard's really high, it's quite daunting. And I want to encourage people next time to put in a proposal and talk about your practice. Talk about what you do. Preferably to do with reading and listening, obviously, but talk about what you do. But yes, it is important to relate it to the theory and show something about where that comes from. And again, it was Olwyn in the panel discussion at the opening who said it's important to read. And I would remind you to read. Now, when I built my little corpus, I had a look also at who were the most cited people in the conference abstracts. Ooh. No. I'm not going to go into detail, but Highland was at the top. But then, you know, he's published a lot of stuff. And obviously, you know, in relation to the conference theme, it's understandable that Bruce came next. And Ding and Bruce was the main part of that. But I also noticed that the BALEAP proceedings was only cited once by one person. And the BALEAP proceedings, which I'm hoping some of you will contribute to, the BALEAP proceedings does give you, if you presented the opportunity to write something up in sort of 2,500 words, it's quite short. But also, if you want something bite-sized to read, you've got your copy of the proceedings. Don't just let it gather dust on the shelf. Do read it. They are quite short and they are practical, and you will take away ideas. And one thing I like to do at a conference is to take home ideas, to take away ideas. I like to get an image of what somebody does in the classroom, and then and then get ideas for my own teaching. I went to a session of Ian Bruce's this morning. I wrote down some notes. I've got my notes, one thing to read. I need to find maybe a couple of texts, and I've got 1 or 2 lessons there for my research students. Great, I've got something I can go away and use next term. For me, that's great. Last point, collaboration. We've seen and heard people talk about collaboration with colleagues, with other departments, or as some of us tend to say, with academic departments, those of us who are in professional services and so on. It's this othering that I don't agree with, but we tend to do it. Collaboration with other universities, in higher education generally, international collaboration. This is important. It is the way forward. Working with other people is a way to make your scholarship manageable. Work with somebody else on something. Share it. You've met people in the last few days. Keep up those links and build on them. That's all I've got to say.
We now have a bit of time for questions and comments for the panel. Would anyone like to ask a question or comment?
I've had personal conversations about but I've not really had anyone talk about. And it's this role of us as the frontline counsellor. So we're often involved with students who are involved in high stakes products. Perhaps they're PhD students who are producing a thesis, perhaps they've come to the UK from abroad and they have a lot invested in what they're doing here. And I know for me that I really see the sort of mental health of my students as being a real issue. And I would like to know, I work in the context of a German university where it's a real issue, and also in the Luxembourg context. And with the Luxembourg students, you see them being turned down, their publications being turned down, and what that does to them. And you are really their first port of call. And I would be interested to know if anybody gets help with dealing with the mental health issues of their students in the EAP context, or if we would think that that should be, how we should address that as another role that we do have. Okay, so I said...
Succinctly.
Yes, very succinctly. I am wondering about the role as us as counsellors, essentially. So lots of us are involved with students who we are the first point of call for them when they're involved in high-stakes products. So producing their theses, for example, perhaps they've been turned down, their publications have been turned down. What do we feel? Are we getting any support in that role as EAP, as the first port of call for us as counsellors? And should we have that? Is that another role? What do we do about that?
Anyone care to?
That's a really interesting question, and I think, okay, first I should say I don't necessarily have an answer to your question, but I think it really underlines the fact that EAP and EAP practice is inseparable of what's happening in society more widely. I know at least in Canadian higher education right now, mental health is probably the number one issue on the radar in terms of services for students, in terms of training for faculty and staff. And I think I could say from my context as well as that of many I know, it's an area that's lacking immensely. And in terms of training, mental health first aid, recognizing mental health crisis, special educational needs, I think it's an area that a lot of us could use a lot more support and training, formal training.
Okay, thank you. Do we have another question? Yes. Sorry, V.
I was really taken with what you said, David, about one answer being we need to stop self-marginalising. I think it's very true. So I wonder if the exalted members of the panel could, sort of in true EAP style, give us some examples of what you do in conversation to not self-marginalise. What do you say, or what do you do? How do you not do that?
Thanks, Joy.
Maybe we should start with Alex.
Yeah. Is this switched up? Can you hear me? Yes, okay. Well, I looked at self-marginalisation in the classroom mainly, so that worries me the most when teachers self-marginalise in front of their students. And I see identity as something that is co-constructed with someone else. So it's not something that we have inside. That's the way I look at it. So, but if you constantly say to your students, "Oh, I'm not a specialist," I'm not, careful what I. This is recorded, isn't it? I need to be careful what I say. I have a colleague at an institution who likes to say, I'm not a specialist. I can't comment, and I just go, "Well, you are a specialist. Of course you can comment. Of course you can say you can read something that the student has produced. You can say, this lacks criticality. You need to explain a little bit more here. The citation is wrong there." So if you can't do that as an EAP practitioner, then who else? So in answer to your question, how can we stop self-marginalizing? Well, maybe we need to think more about how we present ourselves in front of our students.
I might just build on that as well. So much of it is the small linguistic choices we make in how we refer to ourselves, our practice. Another example from my context was I noticed myself and others contrasting, so the pre-sessional EAP program with the students saying, "Oh, okay, you're in EAP now, but when you get into your academic program, blah, blah, blah." And then, but EAP's very academic. So I kind of caught myself saying this, and I've been trying to make a conscious effort to not use this terminology. So in our case, the pre-sessional program is non-credit, so I'll try to contrast credit or non-credit, or your degree program, your bachelor's program, or what have you. But sometimes it's really those small linguistic choices, isn't it?
I would like to add to that in front of my students, when I have to teach on content-based courses, I tell my students, I'm not an expert in the subject, I know nothing about finance, but you are experts in this area, and I'm happy to learn from you. I'm an expert in language, and I'm happy to help you with that.
That's the missing bit, yeah.
I would also like to add our language center's contact in this area. Actually, apart from EP teaching, we also deliver integrated learning to work with subject teacher to deliver actual courses. So CLEO, some of my colleagues talk about CLEO program in our language center. So we do have some such kind of program, work with subject teacher to help students in their content. Yeah.
Would anyone like to either add to that or ask another question or comment? Diane.
I did a program review several years ago for an institution where I'm sure there are people here from that institution. And I was sitting in the meeting with the people from the faculty and from central services and stuff. And one of them pointed out that we did ourselves no favors by continually saying, we're different, we're different, we're different. What we really need to do is to say, here's how what we do is similar to you. Here's how we are working together in a joint effort towards providing students with a good quality education. And so I think we need to be thinking less about our differences and thinking more about how we have common cause with the other people in our institutions.
question at the back, I think, is it?
It's a supremely minor point, but that got me thinking about how our roles are titled in different institutions, which I think is something that does make a big difference.
Yeah.
So having been, an associate lecturer to being a teacher or a tutor, that shouldn't affect how you feel about what we do, but it does affect how you present yourself, because you find yourself saying things like, I'm not a lecturer, I'm just a teacher, or I'm a university teacher, and that's kind of doing down the role of the teacher, but also your version of yourself as not a member of academic staff. And I'd be interested in how institutions make those choices about how we are titled and what that means.
It's true. I always have a moment of panic when I have to fill out the Customs and Immigration landing card, and it says occupation, and I'm like, what do I put? Do I put like the full title, which is this long, or do I put it in terms that this customs officer is going to understand? But you're right, titles carry a lot of meaning and baggage.
Can I just add a couple of sentences to that? Apart from the titles of our roles, titles of the bits of the university we work in. Do you work in a EFL unit, or do you work in Department of Communication, Media and Culture? I think that makes a difference.
Yeah.
Quick one, hopefully. I know the symposium this morning began talking about future-proofing. 10, 20 years in the future, maybe this is specifically for Dr. Zoll, how is tech, AI, machine learning, whatever else, realistically, what would you say are going to be the impacts on EAP? And please tell us the frank truth. Things like writing, and taking into account the reading and listening and speaking are very important. The process of writing, so when the student's producing the writing, how much is tech going to be aiding that so that the product is higher quality? And then the error correction and also the grading, the evaluation. How much of that is going to disappear, be reduced, and so on?
All right, okay. Actually, I would like to address first as AI cannot replace teachers, so we don't need to worry about this. Secondly, the AI for writing and can be very helpful and can benefit students writing, because AI can give some feedback in language, grammar, and replace some jobs for teachers. And teachers can give a face-to-face feedback, but students have a lot amount of time for their self-study. Well, AI tools can help them to give some individual feedback, right, and help them to improve their writing. So it could be a good tool. And also AI for speaking in the future, according to Kemp and his colleague in 2017, by 2024, AI smart classroom will be available in language classroom. So basically, students can use AI tool in the classroom to improve their speaking and presentation, even feedback for their gestures, etc. Yeah. So currently, I'm working on using AI to help students to practice their speaking, such as giving a score in grammar, vocabulary, sentence, content, and also hopefully in the future it can give some feedback as well, right? But the AI technology is currently just like a baby, and it cannot produce, for example, if my intention is also to produce a group discussion feedback, but AI technology can not identify the group discussion at the moment. Yeah.
I might add just another point too. I think another area that technologies is already and will continue to influence is academic integrity. And I was in a few sessions this weekend around issues of academic integrity and plagiarism, and the questions of how we not only use technology to detect academic integrity offenses, but then how do we change our curricula, our policies on EAP programs in prediction of this? So do we allow devices on exams? There was a discussion around listening exams and device use. Do we teach students how to use Google Translate as a writing tool rather than banning it? And so I think those are some questions that lots of us are already asking, but they'll become more and more of a big deal.
Hi, okay, we have a question here. Yeah. Sorry.
Rather than a question, just a quick comment so anyone can grab my microphone quickly. I just want to make a comment. It has been a very insightful conference, and to echo what Jenny just pointed out, like you're looking to the future. I think I would expect to see more presentations from the managers or directors in different units, and to share the practice, the real practice, and the experience, how to support the collaborations and how we break the boundaries between this us and others, and also in terms of I think scholarship, personal developments has been mentioned so much in this conference particularly, but I think we need to hear from, let's just quote what, I don't know if Claire's here, last BALEAP in the plenary talk, Claire Footnox talk about the dark side. We want to hear more about that, to show us and also to share the experience to all the institutions and how we can, I'm not going to use to improve, but inspire us in different contexts and how to support either teachers or practitioners. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, could I address one point for the scholarship support from the director? Actually, our Director Language Center, Chris, supports scholarship a lot. So actually inspired us to work on this area. So if you want to ask experience, you can ask Chris.
Like several colleagues here, I attended the Borden Hay BALEAP conference, the collaborative conference at Essex. And really, it's an identity, practitioner identity question again, really. To what extent do you see great opportunities and synergies between EAP and learning development with academic literacies? Or to what extent do you see it being a potential dilution of EAP's role?
I'll comment on that. I don't see it as being diluting in any way. I think a lot of us are experiencing the fact that this distinction between a second language speaker of English and a first language speaker of English doesn't exist or has been broken down. And it does depend on where we are. I know that there will be some of you who actually teach first language speakers of English, native speakers, home students, whatever you want to call them, as well as second language speakers, and you're probably teaching them very similar things. And we often have students, at Leicester, our unit is only for second language speakers of English, but they decide if they're a second language speaker. So if they have English as an additional language, they may have been in the UK a long time, but if they decide that they need our support, they can come along and be supported by us. But I do think it's very important to work with those colleagues who do teach the home students, to work with organisations like Aldine and to see, because we are doing some similar things and we can learn from each other. And I think that's important.
I would add to that that when I went to different workshops and talks, we don't teach just the language, we teach academic skills, and we teach academic register in particular. And it's, as it has been pointed out several times, nobody is born a speaker or writer of academic discourse. So many times I've been asking myself, wow, these are great research skills being developed. Is it not as well home students who need to have the support before they start their major course?
So just very quickly agree about not differentiating between home students and international students. I really meant the role of the EAP tutor and the role of the learning development. That in certain institutions, the two are being amalgamated with some dissatisfaction, I believe. I just wonder what your views was that.
Yeah, I think this is... not sure if I can answer your question with great accuracy, but one of the things that I observed when, for my master's dissertation in the classroom observations was exactly that. I had a teacher who had some home students and some non-native speakers in the classroom, but this teacher identified very strongly as a language teacher. So the way he or she conceptualized EAP was very different from the way some of us might conceptualize EAP. So, and as a result of that, that teacher ran into terrible trouble in the classroom because that teacher had no support and didn't know how to deal with this dilemma of having native and non-native speakers in the same classroom. Because what happened was that this teacher just basically ended up teaching language to home students, which they didn't need. So I guess that it's a question of professional development, isn't it, and support. And it's also a question of, you know, going back to identity, do we see ourselves more as, do we inhabit more of a language teacher identity, or do we inhabit more a EAP practitioner, I teach academic literacies identity?
I think, Melinda, we have one more. Maybe one more. Yeah, so this is the last question or comment. So, Yolanda.
Thanks, Alex, and thanks to the panel for your interesting evaluations of the conference. I just have one question really, which is, do you think as EAP practitioners we should also be looking more outwards rather than looking so much internally towards our own identities and our roles within institutions, but whether there's kind of scope for us looking towards our communities more broadly and what we can do to advocate for intercultural understanding and more in that area where we do have significant expertise and really it's underutilised as far as, you know, my own experience goes, and whether we should be looking to have a more political positioning UK-wide. And, you know, I've been thinking a lot about how we got to the B word and Brexit, and whether we have a role to play in you know, bringing cultures together and maybe developing a new discourse which eliminates this us and them approach, international home, whether we can be called to delivering a new academic discourse.
I think we have time for maybe one comment.
Well, I would say I 100% agree, and that we can and we do in our collaborations and our actions help to change discourses around not just language, but immigration, internationalization, intercultural issues and harmony, and not only in our institutions, but in society more generally. So I 100% agree with you.
And in many ways that might address our anxieties about our own identity and our value.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we've reached the end. I'd just like to thank the panel for being extremely courageous and being so articulate with what they've had to say today. So thanks very much.